Hello, movie nerds, and welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, a podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about Presence. This is a new horror/psychological thriller movie that came out last week. I think I am very late to the party on this one. It took me a minute to go see it. I do have quite a lot of thoughts on this one. Firstly, I am very curious as to why in the world this film is categorized as a horror or a psychological thriller. So for anyone who is not familiar with Presence, this is a film from the perspective view of a quote-unquote ghost. It is starring Lucy Liu. She is sort of like this very pushy, overachiever mother who has a lot of high expectations for her children. They move into a new home with the sole purpose of getting her son Tyler into like swim team and going to the best school that is available there. And while they are living in this home, the entire movie sort of plays out the plot of the film from the perspective of a presence, or what I think the trailers were leading everyone to believe, a ghost that is in the home. Now, I went to see this one without really knowing all that much about it. I had seen the trailer for this film and had assumed that it was going to be horror because that is what it is categorized as. I was unbelievably disappointed with this movie for a number of different reasons. I do think that 110% Presence was a bait and switch from the company that was distributing this film. I don't know if it was the intention of the director that this should be sort of perceived in the same way, because it does not, to me, feel like this was the director's goal. I don't think there is anything about this film that is a horror. If you are going into this movie expecting to be afraid or expecting like the typical ghost story that we've seen in like The Nun or any sort of ghost, The Haunting of Hill House, any sort of ghost film that you were thinking of, delete it from your mind before you go and see Presence. This one is also an incredibly rare, or at least to me rare, film in that it is filmed obviously from the perspective of the ghost. It is filmed in a lot of single shots, so like consecutive, continuous shots. It is shot from what I think is potentially a chest-high steady cam. And so you have a lot of these sort of continuous shots, scenes that are continuous shots. So it's just steady cam that goes through the movement of the house, which made me incredibly nauseous to watch. So that is something to keep in mind. I will also, just as a note, say that I do typically wear glasses to read. And so 3D movies are pretty difficult for me. If you do not like films where the camera is constantly moving and where the perspective is almost, I would say it's almost like a fisheye. It is a very, distance driven kind of lens. It's like a wider lens. I would make an assumption to that. And you're moving through different rooms and upstairs, and it's all continuously shot. So it can have the effect of making you quite nauseous. It made me very nauseous to watch this film. I hated it mostly, I will say, for the way in which it is shot. I think you have to really like the style in order to even want to sit through and enjoy this film. And I did not at all enjoy the style in which this film was shot. And then I was incredibly disappointed just to follow that up with the plot of this film. It is not a ghost story. It is not anything really related to ghosts. It could definitely just be someone who is invisible, or a presence. Obviously, I think that's why it's called Presence, is that it is just something that no one else can seem to see. The daughter in the film has some idea of what is happening, but nobody really goes into it at all. It really is just it kind of reminds me, and I'm not going to be able to remember now the title of the film, but the newest one that just came out with Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, where the camera is stationary and it sort of just moves through the different eras of time. It's sort of ish reminds me of that, because you don't have a perspective from any of the characters in the film. You are sort of watching it as a third party, but in this case, the third party is part of the film, whereas I think the other movie is called Here. It's just stationary. It's not interactive with any of the characters in the movie. This one also sort of gave me the vibes of Blair Witch Project, you know, with the way that the camera is just strange. And I don't mean vibes of Blair Witch Project as in it's any way related to that sort of thing. You're not going to be afraid in this film. The plot of this movie is somewhat convoluted. The ending to me was very disappointing and made little to no sense. It didn't make sense to me how it wrapped itself up in the end. It was incredibly boring. I think that this should be a drama, potentially. Not a horror or a psychological thriller. I don't think that there were any psychological elements to this in any way, shape, or form. I don't think that there were any horror elements to this either, other than the fact that it's a ghost. I don't know if that counts in the movie industry as a horror. If it's, you know, a paranormal related film, it just automatically gets the tag of horror. I'm not sure if that's how that works. This one is a 100% skip to me. I do know that it has done well in the box office, and by well, this movie cost something like $2 million to film. I think that it has doubled that in the theater, but I wholeheartedly think that it has doubled itself in the theater because of the bait and switch with the trailer, because they sort of have done these promotional, you know, posters and things that make it feel as though it is going to be a scary horror ghost story. And then when you go and see it, you realize that is not the case at all here. I don't know if that is just like a spoiler and gives away the entire movie in its entirety. This one is a hard one to sort of give a review of, but I certainly don't want anyone walking in with a certain expectation and leaving it wondering why I didn't tell you that that expectation was false. So I would 100% skip this one. Potentially, I will add as just a side note, potentially this is just one of those films that has gone entirely over my head and that I'm willing to concede that is possible. I didn't really understand what the point of this movie was. I didn't really feel like everything in the plot was resolved in a way that made very much sense. And it really is just an hour and a half of family drama with the guise of like, it's supposed to be family drama from the perspective of a ghost. I was very disappointed in this one, and for all of the reasons that I have stated, I would not recommend seeing this one in theaters. I would definitely wait until it comes out on streaming so that if you are not enjoying it, you can just turn it off and walk away. But as always, I would love to know what you guys thought of Presence if you have seen this one. Subscribe to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.